Hi, good evening.
Kavod Harav, how are you?
Okay, thank God.
Well, Hashem.
Fine, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. Just 1 second. Okay, so we're continuing in a bit Yosef, where we left off yesterday. So it says like this: If Shashahu Sium Data Yerushalmi, Kamar Yerushalmi Mashma. So it says in Yerushalmi, Gemara Yerushalmi, it implies there Shetzarik Gam Bifnim Mukaf Gvil, that also inside has to be surrounded by blank space, parchment. So we're talking about the letters, right? That the letters of the Sefer Torah or the letters of the Tefillin that we're talking about here, specifically Tefillin, that they have to be surrounded by parchment, even on the inside of the letter. The inner spaces that are inside the letter have to be also surrounded by parchment. So what does that mean? That if there's a hole in there in the parchment, and therefore there's no parchment to surround the letter, it's going to be not kosher. That's what he's trying to say. So so it says, therefore, if all the inside has a hole, as we said, it's pasul, it's not kosher. So it says, possible that we're talking about his own language, that he paskins, kevan, to pasul it, says pasul. Kevan, the Yerushalmi posel, because Yerushalmi postles it, but Talmud Adidan, and in our Talmud, the Babli, it's not really so clear what the halacha is there. But the Rambam, he says, he says like this, the Rambam, if the letter had a hole inside the parchment, like for instance, inside the hay, right? There's a hole there, or toch mem, or inside the mem, and also other letters, kasher, it's kosher. So it doesn't differentiate between nikab mimala kol halal leechad de'eno mimala. So it doesn't make any differentiation, the Rambam, whether it's the whole space between there has a hole or partially. So it's not kosher in either way. That's what he means to say. It's also the Mordechai. And this Gemara, Achar Shehevi Yerushalmi, after he bought Yerushalmi, Katav Umiu Talmud lo by Hekef Gvil. So he said the Talmud doesn't require that it should be surrounded by parchment bifnim, inside the letter, right? Okay. So in other words, it seems to say that there's a dispute between the Yerushalmi Talmud and Arab Talmud, the Babli. So he says all the rabbis agree that you don't require this. Also, Sefer Atuma, Talmud Shelanu Machshir Lagamre, right? Our Talmud makes it kosher either way, right? No matter what. So, meaning what? That we're not really so precise, we're not so medakdek about this issue when it's inside. So he says there's also implication from the language of Rabbeinu, the Torah. Why do you say that there are some who say that even if the whole inside has a hole, kasher, that's kosher, because all the poskim who shvu lamar, they all agree the Talmud Adidan machshir, that our Talmud is machshir, so it's kosher. But if the whole thing got a hole in there, tzarich lomar the mishum the lidish nakama Rashi, and you have to say according to the first language of Rashi, the lo are Talmuda behachi. If the Talmud is not dealing with this klal at all, אין לנו אלא דברי ירושלמי. So it says we only have the words of Yerushalmi. דלא מכשיר אלא אם כן מוקף גביל. Unless it's surrounded by parchment, inside, and it says last language, which deals with this, it implies that even if the hole inside got a hole, kasher, it's kosher. So he says, therefore, that if some say that even if the hole inside has a hole there, so that's according to the ones who say that the second language is the halakha. And that which Rabbeinu said, the Torah, that we're talking about that there's a hole in the inner leg, of the hay. Even if a little bit is left over, it's kosher. It's according to the first language that we wrote, close by. Shapirash Rashi, that Rashi explains, Hadi Amar Ashian Nikav Letochom Sherhei, that which we said, that the inside of the hay got a hole, kasher, it's kosher, with Katabarosh, it says the Rosh Shahu Ikar, that's the halakha. Vashmuinan, the En Shiur Regel Primi. So it says there is no size for the inner leg of the letter. Even if something is left over a little bit, even though all the other poskim wrote that the second language is the halakha, Rabbeinu katav, but Rabbeinu said the Torah, dat harosh, the opinion of the Rosh, which is his father, he said that's how he paskin, mishum de rabbehu, because that's his Rebbe. In other words, his father was his Rebbe, so he passed like him, which is a natural thing, right? No surprise. But he says we, right? We're not all the sons of the Rosh, So we don't have an obligation to go like him always. So therefore, he says, Lo dachinam kol hane ravata mikamei harosh. So he says we don't pass him like the Rosh. Why? Because the majority of the rabbis don't agree with him. So the rule is, we go according to the majority. So therefore, right, this is the reason why we don't pass him like the Rosh. That's what he's saying. Okay, we're gonna see in the Shulchan Aruch how he goes in the end, but this is pretty much the way it's going right now. So it says if the right regel, the foot of the letter got a hole, if there's left over, right, like a small letter, kasher, it's kosher. If not, it's pasul. So it's over there, regarding that which the Gemara said, that if the leg got a hole, it's pasul. We say in the Gemara, so it says it was explained to me. Rabbi Zera says, "Mine de Rav Huna." This rabbi explained to me, that if there is left over the size of a small letter, kasher, it's kosher. Pasul, and if not, it's pasul. He says in Mordechai Bekometz within the Gemara, Hey Amud Bet, the high shura have leot hey. So he says this size, when it comes to the letter hey, we're talking about the letter hey. That applies to that. Or something like that. But he says when it comes to the straight letters, they only have one leg. They don't have two legs. Like Vav and Zayin, Nun, Pshuta, the Nun Sofit. So therefore, if they got a hole, or if siku, or they were cracked, whatever, broken, and a shiuram be'ot ketana. So then we don't measure it like that, like a small letter. Im lo nishar. So he says, on the contrary, that if there wasn't left over, just like the size of the yud, which is the smallest letter, pasul, it's pasul. So then how do we judge it? How do we know if it's kosher or not? We bring a child, right, who's not too smart, not too stupid, like a medium level child, right? Medium IQ, not too smart, not too clever, and not stupid either. So we bring him and then we tell him, okay, do you see what this letter is? Can you read it? Right. So if he can read it, it's kosher, because he's he's an average kid, like not too smart, regular guy. לא טיפש, וכתב עוד, בכל הפשוטות, יכול להיות פסולות, so it could be that also, that all these straight letters, that they're פסול, אפילו יקרא לתינוק, even if you call the kid to read it, זה לא חכים ולא טיפש, it was not this way and that way, כלומר, דכל כנקר ונראה לעין פשוטות. So it says, whatever letter you see that it's recognizable, to the eye, and you can see what it is, שלא נשתהה בו שיעור אות, it doesn't have enough left over for a small letter. Even if the child reads it, was not too smart, not too stupid. We don't care about that because it's not really good enough. It's not big enough. So is that what you wrote in the beginning? It's pashut, it's simple. That's how it's explained in the Gemara. So it's regarding that the leg of the hay has been broken, whatever, or cut off. So then we say, if you have enough for a small letter, and it's regarding the breaking of the vav, we say, and then we say, bring a child. It's a straight letter, not like the hay. So as you can also explain, the shiura de melo od ktana have gam leotiot pshutot. So it says the size of a small letter it also applies to the straight letters. She'en lahem ela yerech echad. They only have one leg. Umay melo od ktana. Melo ot dida. So what does that mean? Like a small letter, a small letter of itself. In other words, a small version of itself. Tomar melo vav ktana. It's like a small vav, which is like just a straight letter. Or nun ktana, or small nun. Nekar yafeh, but it's recognizable well. Shahi vav or nun. We can see that it's a vav or nun. So as long as you can see it, there's also a side to say like that's also sufficient. Okay, very good. So now we'll go to the Shulchan Aruch and we'll see what the halacha is. We brought here a lot of opinions, a lot of different opinions. So it's a little bit. How about you, David?
I'm good. I'm here.
Okay, welcome.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to go to Shulchan Aruch Tetvav. Let's see what it says there. So it says in Shulchan Aruch like this. אם לאחד לאחר שנכתב בתוך ההי. So let's say, right, they already wrote the letter, okay, and then inside the hay, there's a hole in there. Became a hole there. So, a mem, or inside the mem. So these letters are like hollow, they have space inside. Kasher, it's kosher. Interesting. Even if the whole inside has a hole. So what does that mean? The hole is large enough to fill up the whole gap there, the whole inside. That's the first opinion. Kosher anyway. Abab Yerushalmi mashma, but it's in Yerushalmi. Right, it implies shegam b'fnim tzarich yeshem mukav k'vel haklav. It implies over there that it has to be also surrounded with parchment on the inside as well. So therefore, it's not kosher. So we have two different opinions over here. Nikav regel pnimi shel hay. So if the inside leg of the hay has a hole, afilu lo nishar mimenu ela kosher, even if a little bit is left over, kasher the arosh, according to Rosh is kosher. Aval shar poskim matzrichim kumlo ot ktana. But it brings there the Haggah, the Ramah from Bet Yosef, as we just mentioned, that the other poskim require that you have to have a small letter. So what does that mean? It means like a small vav or a small nun, right? As we said, depending on what letter we're talking about. Nikav regel, if the foot of the letter got a hole, haymani, the right one, the right side. Im nishtar mimenu melo ot ktana, if it's left over from it, the size of a small letter, right? Kasher, it's kosher. Ve'im la pasul. If not, it's pasul. What's, by the way, the smallest letter on the Hebrew alphabet? The Yud is the smallest, right?
Yes.
So that's what we're talking about, right? If you have enough there to be like a Yud, if that fits big enough to be that much, it's good enough. So let's review this. Okay, let's just get it straight because it's a little bit confusing here because there's several opinions. So let's get what the halacha really is. So we're saying like this, right? Im leachar shenichtab nekev betoch hay, shenichtab nikav betoch hay. So let's say they wrote a hay on the tefillin, and then it got a hole inside, right? Oh, a mem, or in the mem, kasher, it's kosher. Afilu nikav kol tocho, even if the whole inside has a hole. Shenekev emaleh kol hachalav, that fills up the whole blank, the space there, right? Empty space, the hollow space. But mashma shegam b'fnim tzarich shemukav kalav. But Yerushalmi, it implies that it should be also surrounded with parchment inside as well. So according to Yerushalmi, it's not kosher. So what's the halakha here, right? How do we do? We have two opinions here. So the rule is like this, Shulchan Aruch, stam v'yesh, halakha is like the stam. What does that mean? The first halakha is brought as stam. What does that mean? No author, just a regular language, right? Regular law. The second one is brought with an author, right? Yesh. What does that mean? Yerushalmi. So the rule is, that also there's another reason why we go according to the first opinion. The first of all is because one first is stam, the other one is yesh. So we go according to the first opinion. This is the rule. There's the second reason also why, because when there's a machloket, when there's a dispute between the Bavli Talmud and Yerushalmi, we go like the Bavli. Why is that? Because it was accepted by the Jewish people. So therefore, always, as a general rule, this is the way it is. We go like the Bavli against Yerushalmi. But that's only when there's a machloket between them, when there's a dispute between them. But if there's no dispute, so then we go like the Yerushalmi as well. Only when there's a dispute we're talking about. So here, it's simple, right? The halakha is like the first opinion. So what does that mean? If you have a hole inside, which came after you wrote it, there will be kosher. Yeah, I'm sorry. You were saying something?
No, we're listening.
Okay, very good. So that's halakha. But according to Yerushalmi, as we said, we don't want any holes anywhere inside there, right? So therefore, it should not be like that. So if you want to be machmir, you want to be a hasid, you want to be more righteous than the halakha, you shouldn't use this kind of tefillin. Get a new one, buy a new one, right? Go to the online stores, right, and Google and buy a new one, like we all do today, right? Okay, very good. So that's the way it is. Okay. Let's go on.
So I'm sorry to interrupt. Is this Hebrew classes or Hebrew lessons?
I'm sorry. What was the question?
Is this Hebrew? Hebrew, learn how to read Hebrew?
No, it's not really that. No, we're learning halakha. Did somebody tell you this is a Hebrew class?
Oh, okay.
Did they tell you? Did they tell you that this is a Hebrew
No,
class?
I wasn't sure because I just joined for the. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I was like, well, I just haven't got it without the vowels.
Right, I understand. Yeah, we're not
Now that
really learning Hebrew so much. We're learning the halachas.
Now that you joined, you're stuck.
Okay.
You're
All right.
stuck with it.
Halakha, you mean the oral law, right?
Jewish law.
Yes, okay.
Okay, very good. So that's the first part. Right now we have a second part here. So the second part says Nikav regel primi shel hay. What about if you have the inner leg of the hay has a hole? Afilu lo nishar mimenu ela koshu, even if a little bit is left over. Kasher, it's kosher according to Rosh. And then the Ramah brings another opinion, which is that you have to have at least like a small letter, like a small vav. It should be at least that big. So here also the halacha would be like the first opinion, which is that as long as you have like a small thing left over there, it could be like a yud, as we said, it's the smallest letter, that will be good enough. That's the second halacha. Then we have the third halacha, which is nikab regel haimani, right? If the right leg got a hole, im nishta'er mimenu malo ot ktana, if there is enough there to be a small little letter, like a small vav, kasher, it's kosher. V'im lav, if it's not so, right, pasul. Now, right. So let's just get that straight, right? That in the maybe I didn't say it 100% 100% accurately, so I'll repeat it. We said, right, it depends on which leg you're talking about. If you're talking about the inner leg, that means a little leg, which is on the hay, that little thing, which is on the bottom of the hay. That little thing could be even the smallest thing. Whatever you got there, a little thing, it's kosher, according to Rosh. But then he talks about the right leg, so there you need at least like a small letter. So it's a little bit different, right? These two halachot, depending on which leg you're talking about. Okay, whatever. Maybe it's not so practical for us because we're not writing tefillin, but that's pretty much the way it is. Okay. Let's go to Tet Zayin. So it says the Shulchan Aruch like them, so Beit Yosef like this. If one of the letters got broken, right, or cracked, whatever, and what happened is that you bring a child, as we said, right, who's not too smart, not too stupid, like average child, and if he knows how to read it, if he can read it, kosher. Ve'im la pasul. If it's not, if he doesn't know how to read, it's pasul. That's, by the way, always what we do. If you have, like, for instance, you have a Sefer Torah, right? And sometimes what happens is that when they bring out the Sefer Torah to read it, they see, one of the letters is like broken or whatever, cracked. So they don't know what to do, right? Should they use that Sefer Torah? Is it kosher? Not kosher? So the rule is, that what we do is we bring a little child, right? Who, like, grade school child, something like that, right? Third grader, fourth grader, right? We bring one of those kids, and we tell him. We say, can you read this? What does it say there? Right. So if he can read it, he's not a very smart kid, average kid, right? So if he can read it, it's kosher. Why do we go according to him? Because he's average, so he's like a kid. He's not, because why don't we bring an adult to read it, by the way? That's the question, right? Anybody can answer that question? Why do we bring a child?
To read what? I'm sorry?
Why do we bring a child to read it to see if it's kosher? Why don't we bring an adult?
Oh,
You understand the
Because
question?
an adult can make out what it is. Like it can see a little patterns of the letter and say, oh, this one should be this letter. But a child is barely learning, so they will have to see the pattern completely in order to recognize it.
Yeah, you're getting close to what I was going to say. You know what the answer is? It's very close to what you're saying. The answer is like this, that the adult can see what it is from the context. You understand? He doesn't have to really recognize the letter. He just knows because he knows what this means. So he'll tell you, oh yeah, this is a nun. Yeah, okay. But he knows because he knows what the word is. But the child doesn't know what that word is, He doesn't really, he's not that smart. So therefore, only if he recognizes the letter, he'll tell you what it is. That's why we don't want to.
interesting.
That's why we don't want to use an adult.
All
Okay.
right.
That's the idea. So it goes on. Sham Rambi Bar Chama, there's a Gemara over there. You see the Vav. So what happened was that the Vav got broken. There was a case in the Gemara. The Vav of the got broken. The Vayarog Benukva. This letter of this word Vayarog, Vayareg. Uperesh Rashi explains Vav ira Makom Nekev. So he says the Vav is in the place where the hole is. Ken Yud, like looks like a Yud. Atalekame de Rabbi Zera. So he came to Rabbi Zera to ask him if it's kosher or not. So what did he tell him? He told him, bro, go bring a child who's not very smart and not stupid, average child. Katvuat Tosfot said Tosfot Mordechai Dalet Niret Kemo Yud Yesh Dachshir. So he says that if the Dalet looks like a Yud, we can be machshir. We can say it's kosher. Alidei kriyat tinok by a child bringing it. The la hakim rotipesh was not smart, not stupid, average child. Ukvar katabti v'samuch. So he says we already wrote close by. Shebadavar pashut afilu krele yanuka. So he says when it comes to something simple, even if you call a child kilchata pasulhu. It's pasul. In other words, he's trying to say, right, that if it's something which is very recognizable, just something which is very easy to recognize without having to really recognize it, just from a context, as we said, it doesn't help you to do it this way. He says, this rabbi. He also says this. Says that's what we're going to write in Lamed Vav. Katav Rabbeinu Menachem Hameiri, right? The Meiri says, Nikab Yerecho says if the leg got a hole, who as a regel shebehei, one of the legs of the hay, hen yemani ben simali, whether it's the right leg or the left leg, he's keru bo shnei tikunim. So he says there's two ways to fix that problem. Echad nishta'er bo kimlo ot ktara. One is that it's left over there like a small letter, enough to be a small letter. V'ashani called the Yenuka la hakim lo tipesh, or you bring a child, right, who's not too smart, not too stupid, and he reads it, ketikuno, like properly, v'nirina dvarim al shnei tinokim elu, tikunim elu. So he says, they're both good, these solutions. She'al shnei minei dekavim hen, so he says that they are, talking about two different types of holes. Because the beginning is talking about kind of a hole that it's like cutting off the edge of the width of the hay of the foot of the letter. Shehu ava, which is thick, and it's a little bit. There's a little hole there. Some of it there's a hole. Mitzad rechavo, from the width, besafat arochav, on the edge of the width. But when it comes to the length of the letter, nishar kayam, it's still existing. Tzad rochav hatzad ha'acher, from the width of the other side. So he says, right, that since that the it's left over, the length is left over, without any holes, the size of a small letter, for instance, like a small letter like a vav or yud, it's kosher. Because even if he made in the beginning like that, the foot of the letter very thin, it's still kosher. ואחר כך דיברו בשניקה באמצעית הרגל. And afterwards he says, we're talking about that, the second case, he's talking about where it got a hole on the middle of the leg, עד שנפסק הרגל, until it got broken, the whole leg, צידו העליון, the top of it, מן התחתון, from the bottom. So it's like split up into two pieces. ותיקון זה תלוי בשיר נקב דק כל כך. So he says, this now, what does it really need to fix it up? What solution do you need? That it should be, right, that the hole is so small, שאין הפסק מונע מקריאת רצה. That the fact that it's broken, it cracked, doesn't prevent you from reading it. In other words, you still can see what the letter is, even though it's cracked. So you have to bring the child, as we said, right, to fix that problem, to see if he can read it. That explains it very well, by the way, what he's saying here. So he says, I found in this book, regarding the vav of this letter, so he brought a child who's not to his average child. Tosfot explains, so he says, if he's wise, the child, he knows that this is a disrespectful to God. The more yareg, that right. So to say say it this way, so he'll say vayarog. So in other words, he'll know from the context, as we said. That's what he's trying to say, right? That you shouldn't say it that way. Say it this way. So he says we should learn from here that he can show it to the tinok. He can show him the whole line. You don't have to cover anything, when you show it to the kid. So what does that mean? Don't be afraid, like, if I show him the whole line, he'll know from the context. You don't have to do that. You don't have to go that far. If you're going to ask me, so if you're going to ask me, right, how do we say it's kosher? Any letter that gets broken, there's a letter, there's a hole there. But didn't we say in the Gemara Amud Aleph, Kol od she'en gvil mukaf la me'arba ruchotzeha psula? Right? Didn't we say that any letter that isn't surrounded totally with parchment pasul? But so this one is not, right? That's the whole thing, because it's broken. So it's not surrounded with parchment. So the answer is, he says that we should say that that's talking about something else. That's talking about where two letters are touching each other, right? Two separate letters. And there we say it's not kosher. But if one letter is broken and there's a hole there, that we don't say that like that. It's not relevant. That's how Rashi comes out. So he says that it's not surrounded by parchment. It's touching another letter. That's when we have a problem with that. So this is regarding this issue, that there's a vav of vayarog which is broken. Katav vav de vayarog ira b'makom neked. So it says he wrote vav, and so it got broken at the place of the hole. Mashma de beshat k'tivat paga v'nekev. So it implies that he that happened when he was writing it. In other words, there was already a hole there from the beginning. Nevertheless, it's kosher. If as long as the kid can read it, as we said, the average kid, it's still kosher. Also, we say another thing, which is that which we were machshir when it got broken with a hole. That's talking about that it happened after it was written. Since at the time of the writing was kosher, right? That the was surrounded by parchment at that time, from the four sides. So therefore, afterwards, if there's a hole, then it's kosher, no problem. We don't have a problem with that. Okay. שהיה גביל מקיפה בארבע ארוחותיה, that because at that time it was surrounded totally by parchment as it needs to be. אם נקבע אחר כך כשרה, and then if the hole came afterwards, still kosher, as we said. כיוון דלא שתחילתה היה בכשרות. Why? Since the beginning was kosher. It started out kosher. Okay. אבל כשתחילת כתיבתה הייתה השם נקב, but if in the beginning, when you wrote it, there was a hole there already, right? Then it became pasul. Even though there is enough there to make a small letter, it's still pasul. Why? Because it was never surrounded by parchment in the beginning. That's how it seems also from the Rambam. Okay, I'm sorry about that. The internet got cut off.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, there you are.
The internet got cut off. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Okay, let's get back to our discussion. So as we said, right, that the Rambam also holds this way. He says, Rab Levi ibn. So in the tshuva, in the response of this rabbi, Rab Levi ibn Habib, right? Katuv halacha l'maseh. He writes, so what's halacha practically speaking? B'mei sofer amuvhak, Rabbi Yosef HaKohen, with this in this rabbi, right? Who was a big sofer. He was a big scribe, right? Nishmato Eden. Ba'u lefanai pamim rabot. It says people came to me several times. So what happened? The leg of this kaf sofit, right, which is a long letter. He was coming to the end of the parchment. Without being surrounded by parchment. So you know what that means? In other words, it was so long, this letter, it went to the end of the parchment, so it wasn't surrounded on the bottom with parchment. Right. So it says, I told him that's pasul. As kenim, older rabbis, I told them, nishmatam eden. Al pi svad k'tzat poskim. Says according to some of the poskim, shekatru ken beperush, that they wrote like that. That if it's not surrounded by parchment, when you wrote it, that's it, right? No good. So he says, nobody argued with me about that. In other words, everybody shut his mouth and agreed. Right? Okay. Interesting. So he says, nobody argued with me. He says, even though from the Rambam, we don't really have a strong proof to puzzle this. So it says, because you never mentioned anything like this, that this puzzles the Tefillin. Only when two letters are touching each other, as we said, right? That's something else. We're not talking about that here. Here we're talking about one letter, right? That's a different story. You can't compare one to the other. So it says, Because as we said, right, you need to have it's brought down there in the gloss that you need to have surrounded by parchment. Tochaot, also the inside as well. Kishenikav haor, when there's a hole in the parchment. Sham. All the more so, you do need to be surrounded by parchment. The whole ot from all sides of the letter. From the outside. It's also explained like that in Yerushalmi. The Rabbi Meiri says in the Meiri, the Sifro Kiyat Sefer, this book that he has, he wrote explicitly, that if it had a hole before it was written, so if the ink doesn't cover it up, it's too big to cover it up. Pasul, that's what we learned yesterday. So the same thing here applies as well. But if it got a hole after you wrote it already, that's a different story. So regarding this in the Gemara, they said, that if the inside got a hole, kasher, it's kosher. If it's the leg, it has to be a small letter left over, as we said. Kasher. If not, it's pasul. Rami Bar Tamre. So it says they also said, right, Ipsik le Vav, that there was this rabbi that the Vav got broken on his right on his Tefillin, whatever. It wasn't it wasn't Tefillin, it was Sefer Torah, but it's the same halakha. Ad kan nireh shel da'ato gam ledat harambam. So he says it seems that according to his reasoning, according to his opinion, and also the Rambam, Kenhu, that's the halakha. Midlo hevi svarato klal, since he didn't bring his opinion at all, gam b'divrei tur in the tur, orachaim yesh ledaek l'shedato hi ken. So we can see that his opinion is like this. Gam Rama b'perek bet the Gitin. This is also the Rama in Gitin. K'sheba levaer shen dibuk haotiyot poser and beget. When he came to teach us that when it comes to a get, right, when you divorce your wife, the two letters will stick together. Don't puzzle the get. Don't disqualify. Tafas be'muchlat shechisaron ekev kavir. So he says over there that if you're lacking that the letter is surrounded by parchment, mitzad shenital from the fact that right there's a hole there, got broken. And when it comes to tefillin, it's pasul. The Sefer Torah kebon chisaron gvil mitzad dibuk. So it says the Sefer Torah it's also lacking parchment mitzad dibuk because they're sticking together. Okay, so all this right is very also quite confusing. So let's see the Shulchan Aruch and we'll try to make sense out of all of it. Lots of different opinions here. So it says like this, right? This is Shulchan Aruch. Nifsak o echad me'otiyot. If one of the letters got broken, right? And by the way, this happens quite often because it just the parchment wears out because of dryness, all kinds of things. It's a very common thing altogether. This kind of thing. So it says, Pshutot, the Rama says right here, it means that we're talking about the straight letters, Kagon, Vav and Zayin, like Vav and Zayin, straight letters, or Shenifsak Regel, or the leg, the Kiltzebo, and things like this, whatever. So he says, Im Tinok Sheno Lo Chacham, Velo Tipesh. So we bring our average kid, right? Not too smart, not too stupid. We bring our average kid, because he doesn't know the context. We have to bring him, like Yodea, the Kotov, he knows how to read it, Kasher. So this is the way we fix the problem, This happens, by the way, fairly often. You see a Sefer Torah, this feeling we don't see it because it's always closed. But if you check it once in a while, you see it, whatever, the Sofer sees it. So, by the way, the fact that it's closed up, the tefillin, actually guards it, from getting damaged. Okay, sorry about that. Let's try that again. So as we said, right, that as I was telling you, I wanted to explain one thing, right, that when it comes to Tefillin and the Sefer Torah, there's one difference, right, one big difference. The Tefillin is closed. So because it's airtight, it's like hermetically sealed, you know? So the air doesn't get in there, so it doesn't get damaged as much. And that's why, you know, once you buy like a pair of Tefillin, and, you know, you establish that it's kosher at the beginning, you bought it from an expert or whatever, or you had it checked. So once that happened, you don't have to check it again. Why? Because since it's closed, airtight, we assume that it's not going to get damaged. But when it comes to Sefer Torah, you know, since we open it all the time, it's not airtight, it's not hermetically sealed. So therefore, the damages can be quite much more. That's the thing, you know. So whatever, but either way, but if you do find something like that the letter is cracked, and we're not really sure, like, you know, is this like kosher? It's not like the original letter that was written. So what do we do? As we said, right? The solution is bring the kid, the average kid, right? The average Joe. Bring him over and let's see if he can read it. Right? If he reads it, kosher. If not kosher, right? So what do? We got to fix it, right? By the way, with Sefer Torah, it's much easier to fix it than with Tefillin. You know why that is? Anybody know why?
No.
So the reason is because with Sefer Torah, if one letter gets damaged, you can just fix it, you know, rewrite that letter, you know, but you can't do that with Tefillin because it has to be written in the right order. So over there, it's much, you know, sometimes you can't fix it. You have to get rid of it. There's no, you know. So what do we do in a case like that? We bury it, you know, in the Geniza, and we buy new Tefillin. So that's the way it is, right? So you can't really fix it at that point. So then he says, the N. One second. Yeah, the N. Tzarich lechasot lo shar otiyot kemo shenogim, right? And he says you don't have to cover the other letters with this kid, you know. Wait, let me cover it, you know. So why? Because maybe you're afraid he's going to see the context and read it from the context. You don't have to be afraid of that. There's no reason to be afraid of that. So what does that mean? Just let him read it naturally, right? So no pressure, no nothing, right? Let's see if he can read it. So that's the story there. So why aren't we afraid that he's going to read from the context? Because he doesn't know the context. He's not smart enough. So therefore, we just let him read it as it is. So says the Rama, so look what he says, right? But if we see that the letter is not really legible, in other words, the kid did read it, you know, I don't know, he got lucky, right? Whatever, you know, beginner's luck. But it's not really legible, though. You know, like you look at it and you see, you know, it doesn't really look like what it is. Pasul, so it's pasul. He says, even though the child can read it, right? So that's interesting. I'm not really sure if everybody agrees with that. It could be that we don't agree with that. Maran doesn't seem to hold like that, but it's interesting anyway. There's an opinion like that. Right, he brings this from the Maharik and also the Rivash. Interesting. So he says that which we say that the letter is kosher when it got broken. That's only if it was written originally in a kosher manner, and then it got broken. Right? That's what it is. I'm sorry. But if there was a hole there originally when the letter was written at the time, and therefore, right, there was a hole there, and it got broken because of that, right? The letter. It's a broken letter. So it was never written properly. That's what we're saying, right? or im regel kaf pshuta, says, or if the leg of the straight cuff, or kilsaba magia lesof haklav, it comes to the end of the parchment, as we said, right? That's a problem. Why? Because it's not surrounded by parchment. It goes to the end. It goes all the way to the bottom. Right? The sofa klav, believe hekeb klav, without any surrounding it, right? In the beginning, it was never surrounded. Pasul. So I want to review this one more time, right? The Shulchan Aruch. It's a little tricky also, but actually it's not that hard. So I'll review it one more time, just make sure you got it. These things are a little bit tricky, a little precise, right? You gotta be on the ball. You gotta drink a cup of coffee, before you learn this stuff. Okay, so that's why I have my coffee with me here. There you go. Okay, so one more time, right? So it says Nifsaka echad meotiot. If one of the letters got broken, okay? Im tinok sheno lo chacham velo tipesh. If a child who's the average boy, right, average Joe, yodea nikroto, he can read it. Kasher, it's kosher. Ve'im la pasul, if not pasul, this is the halacha. Okay, so then we're talking about. He says, "Ve'en tzarich lechasot do she'ar etotiyot kemo shenuagim." You don't have to cover the other letters, so we shouldn't see the context. We're not worried about that. We don't go that far. So then says the Rama, okay, it says like if we see it, right, but the letter is not really intact, right, at all, right? Even though the child read it, he says anyway it's not good. It's a different opinion apparently. But anyway, it says the Shulchan Aruch afterwards, right? So it's that which we're. By the way, it does make sense though what he's saying. That if it really looks bad, like it's totally like not legible. I mean, the fact that the child read it, it could be just that he was lucky. Beginner's luck, as we said, right? So yeah, it makes sense what he's saying. Anyway, right? But it says the Shulchan Aruch in the end, that which we say that it's kosher, when the letter got cracked, that's only if it was written originally well, everything was kosher. And then it got broken, it got cracked. That's something else. But it says, however, but if there was already a hole there when it was written originally, and therefore it was always cracked, this letter. It was never intact. That's a different story, right? So what do we say regarding that? We said in Bet Yosef yesterday and today, we said it twice, right? That in the case like that, if the ink, if the hole is not so big, so therefore the ink covers it, so you can't see it. If that's the case, it's kosher. But if the hole is bigger and the ink can't cover it up, you still see a hole there. So that letter was never kosher. That's what we're saying. It's that big. Right? Pasul. So if that's the case, or the other case is what? Or let's say the letter was so long, it went to the edge of the bottom of the parchment. Right? That's the way it was from the beginning. Pasul. So in cases like that, it's pasul. That's the thing, right? So basically, right, this is the way it is. That we need to have always. So by the way, let me just give you one quiz question over here, right? A little quiz, trick question. I don't know, whatever you want to call it, right? Just to make sure you guys are on the ball. Let's see if somebody can get this answer. We already said the Bet Yosef, but I just want to see whatever. So my question is like this, right? We said that if there's a hole inside the letter, right? If it was like that from beginning, there was a hole, and the ink doesn't cover it. We said it's pasul, right? Not kosher, right? So the question is why? What's the reason why it's not kosher like that? But the child could read it, right? So the child can recognize it, so it's recognizable. It's still not kosher, right? So the question is why? Anybody remember what we said about this? So the answer is like this, right? The reason why it's not kosher is because it's inside there where the hole is. It's not surrounded by parchment. You understand? And that we require that the whole letter has to be surrounded by parchment. This whole thing. So this is the reason why it's not kosher, that case. And the same thing also, when you have the letter, which is very long, it goes all the way to the end of the parchment. So on the bottom, it's not surrounded by parchment. This is the problem. You understand? And this is the reason why it's not kosher. Okay, that's the end of that. Shulchan Aruch. Let's see if we can do a little bit more. We got like 5 minutes. Are you guys tired already?
No, I mean, it's not the most exciting thing to learn about, but
Yeah, that's true. But
it's
for us Torah guys, it's very exciting. This stuff we get excited. We get goosebumps, when we read this stuff.
right.
I'm joking, but it's actually very true. Okay, so anyway, right? Let's go and see what we can do here.
I remember learning about this in Chafetz Chaim. Actually, it brings memories.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see where we are next one.
You're surprised, right? That I actually remember something with Gocha in the class.
Okay, well, every study that a person does has some advantage. So that's the way it is.
Well, I always thought that tefillin could also go bad. We have tefillins checked. I mean, I remember I had my original tefillin.
Yeah, it's sure. There's always a lot of things that can happen, but the truth is that the tefillin is much better than the Sefer Torah. There's also, by the way, a question with the mezuzah. Why? Because the question is, right, as we said, the rule is like this in halakha, that tefillin doesn't require to be checked.
Yeah.
Once you establish that it's kosher, it doesn't require to be checked anymore. But the mezuzah needs to be checked twice in every 7 years.
Because I remember.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you cut out there. Anyway, right, as we said, right, the mezuzah needs to be checked twice in 7 years. And so the tefillin doesn't have to be checked at all. So the question is, what's the difference between the tefillin and mezuzah? Anybody know what the difference is?
Between the what?
What's the difference between the tefillin and mezuzah? The mezuzah needs to be checked twice in 7 years. And the tefillin never needs to be checked.
The mezuzah
Why
is
is
not
that,
really,
by the way?
it's not sealed. The mezuzah is
there
not
you go,
sealed.
right? Okay, you're on the ball, David. You're getting there. So
Yeah, but you know what?
this.
It's the tefillin is not exactly sealed in some kind of a vacuum chamber. Air does get in there.
It's pretty airtight, I must tell you. It's pretty tight.
It's tight as it can be as far as parchment and thread goes, because it's put together with thread and glue.
Right, but it's pretty darn tight. But anyway,
yeah,
like,
I mean, I don't know if you realize that even in a waterproof diver's watch, things get in there.
Oh, yeah. Well, if it fell into water, that's a different story. We're not talking about that, right? We're just talking about moisture in the air. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
or the sweat on your body. Things like this, right?
Yeah.
But let me tell you something interesting, right? So the tefillin never needs to be checked. The mezuzah has to be checked twice every 7 years. So as we said, right, the difference is because the mezuzah is open and the tefillin is closed.
No, I didn't do anything, Dave. I just.
But here's the interesting thing, right? That according to the research that I did, I posted something on this a couple of years ago. You guys can see it, whatever. When I did a video on this. So the truth is, after I researched it, I found out that since the mezuzah is open,
Don't break that open. It's time to go. It takes me 1 second.
this is the reason why. Since the mezuzah is open, this is the reason why I have to check it. But now we know what they do when you go to the store and buy the mezuzah. You know what they do?
Put it in plastic.
Exactly. They seal it with cellophane, right? they wrap it up with cellophane, so it's also very closed very tight. So therefore, according to that, there's room to say, that the mezuzah also doesn't need to be checked. Why? Because since it's closed airtight, it's just like the tefillin today. It's really much.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, how far back did they start doing that?
It's something recent, like modern. It's like a modern thing.
Yeah, well, they should have thought about it a long time ago.
Yeah, because they didn't have that stuff, in the old days, the cellophane. You know what I mean? So we're talking about like the last 100 years, God knows whatever, right? 50 years, 100 years, whatever. Right, so that's what it is, So it's more than 50 years. So anyway, right? That's the reason why. So if a person has his mezuzah sealed up in cellophane, he probably doesn't need to check it either, But if you want, you could check it. Whatever. But it seems like it's not necessary according to what we said. Okay, so I guess we'll stop there. We'll continue next time with Hashem next week, Sunday night. Thanks for coming. Chazak u'baruch, Laila Tov. Be blessed with wealth, health, and happiness, and Shabbat Shalom. I'm sorry.
Shabbat Shalom.
Kabbalah Hara. Thank
Okay,
you.
God bless all of you.
Amen.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks for coming. All the best. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.